everyone, and welcome to another episode of Cloudy with a Chance of Therapy. My name is Justin,
I'm Kristin.
and we are here to talk to you about life, mental health, and anything else that comes to our mind. Um, we are a bit late on this one. I do apologize. We're like a day or two late. Just stuff has happened. But we will normally we'll be getting these out on Thursdays, so I apologize that we're not doing that this week. Um, so to start, how you doing this week, Kristen?
Uh, Fair to middling, as my dad would say. Fair to middling.
Fair Midland? Anything interesting happening?
Um, just streaming, same as I have been. And I think that probably the only interesting thing is we have our um friend stepdaughter's birthday party that we're helping judge. She's having a great British Bake Off themed birthday party. So Justin and I have been asked to help judge the design entries. So
So we're gonna it's an excuse to go over and eat cupcakes,
pretty
basically.
much, pretty much.
And then last week we saw How to Train Your Dragon.
Yeah.
And
So that was the day after we recorded the podcast. I think it was Thursday. Um, the movie was absolutely amazing. If you haven't had a chance to see it and have seen the animated movies, I did not have the same hesitations with that I did for Lilo and Stitch. It was absolutely amazing. Um, so good. The flight scenes were spectacular. What was your favorite part of it?
um, actually, I like the way they did Stoic. I mean, yeah, the movie was basically a shot-for-shot remake, but Stoic came across as really good
Mhm.
in that as a scared dad kind of thing.
Yeah, especially we kind of talked about that. One of the things that we both like about the movie, because in we are going to do an episode on grief, and I'll talk about that again. I'll talk about that more. My mom was a special needs teacher, and one of the big things for her, and why I think she would have loved the movies, is everyone's included, whether they are missing eyes, limbs, what have you. Everyone is still a part and has a necessary part to play. And one of the things that sets Hiccup apart and sets him up as being the chief to be, and what Astrid falls in love with, is the fact that he's not like the others. And actually, the entire group of kids are not like the others. Um, you have Fish Legs, who is the geek, the one that knows everything. You have the twins, who are just goofballs, and then you have Snotlout, who just wants to be noticed and a part. And then Hiccup, who is uh struggling with this I'm different than everyone else, and then Astrid, who isn't. Astrid is the quote unquote epitome of a Viking, what they think a Viking child should be. Um, but what she falls in love with and what sets Hiccup apart is his empathy. The line that always stands out to me is the scene after Toothless is gone, and I'm not going to explain why for anybody who hasn't seen it. But Astrid comes up to Hiccup and is like, "I want to remember what you say right now because it matters." And she's asking Hiccup about why he didn't kill Toothless when he first found him captured. And he says, because he was just as scared as I was. And I always kind of appreciated that aspect of the movie. And that's something that my mom would have loved. She would have loved the inclusion that everybody is important, not because they fit, not because they are perfect in that they fit their role. I mean, Astrid is important. She is the warrior, she is the leader. And Hiccup talks about that. He talks about how Astrid is the epitome of what they all strive to be, and how he feels that she is the child that Stoic would have wanted. But everybody matters. And that's what my mom would have loved about it. No one is ostracized or left out, even as much as Hiccup feels like he is. He really truly isn't. He's just trying to be protected because he's a string bean. But I thought the casting was perfect. The music was amazing. It was visually stunning. The dragons looked amazing. The acting was spot on. It was everything I wanted it to be and more. And I really, really hope they do the others. And I really, really hope that they bring the voice actress, Kate
Blanchett.
Blanchett, thank you, back for the other one. She did the voice for Volca. So you got me on a segue.
Well, I mean, not a bad one.
But
But we are planning on doing a thing where we start talking about movies specifically and the mental health representation therein. That's just coming down the pipeline.
yeah, so if
Uh,
anybody has any movies that they think would be good to talk about, so some that we do plan on talking about, we do plan on talking about how the Marvel movies treat PTSD. Um, I think that's going to be a really good example, because they talk about, they do examples of vastly different versions and aspects of PTSD. Um, and I feel like they do a really good job with it. But that, well, and then you have also like Jessica Jones is a great example of a different aspect of PTSD, trauma focused PTSD, where you have um Tony Stark, his is also trauma, but it's an entirely different type of trauma. So that to say, if you have any um suggestions, think things that you think would be great to talk about, we do want to talk about arcane and grief, specifically parental loss. So if you haven't watched Arcane, that's a heads up. It does deal very heavily with parental loss and grief. But those are two specific ones that are coming down the pipeline. So if there's any, long story long, if there are any suggestions that anybody wants to make, things that they think would be great to add to that, again, you can. We have a Facebook page. It's the same as the podcast, Cloudy with a Chance of Therapy, or you can reach us again at the email, which is cloudywithachancethereapy@gmail.com.
no of.
Yes, no of.
All right. Well, that actually does work out because we want to talk about today. We're talking about the different forms of anxiety and like specific
Yeah.
types of anxiety. So we already mentioned PTSD, and we talked about complex PTSD before.
hmm We
So
also talked about a little bit last session, um, we also talked last week about specifically the differences between like generalized anxiety and panic.
yeah, but let's start off with what are the different kinds of like anxiety issues. We talk about PTSD and CPTSD. What else are we looking at?
So, one that a lot of people don't think about would be that is like white coat syndrome. So that's like the people who have panic or anxiety when having to deal with anything medical. So it can be, for me, an example, like,
Like that's like an inordinate response to an environmental effect.
yes. Another, it's almost in the category of phobias, but it is not considered a diagnosable or diagnostic phobia. So it is like, for example, for me, the biggest notice is I have a spike in my blood pressure, and we're talking pretty significant spike in my blood pressure. And I can always tell when I go in and I know it's going to be high, because I could be like, it's going to be high. I can tell you right now, it's going to be high. I'm feeling stressed and anxious. So,
All right. Well, let's start with one that everybody's heard of: PTSD.
mhm.
What is PTSD?
Post-traumatic stress disorder. So post-traumatic stress disorder can come from like numerous different things. We You've probably heard it most commonly associated with veterans. Prior to, I believe about Desert Storm is when we started using the diagnosis of PTSD. It was shell shock, or um, I can't remember what the one from World War One was. Battle syndrome, things like that. Though it can be examples of things like having blackouts, having dissociative events. It isn't just that, and it is not something that just veterans experience, but it is a very common diagnosis. And by common, I don't mean that every person who serves in the military is going to have a PTSD diagnosis. It's just if you look at
The rates are higher.
the rates are higher. It's also, interestingly enough, the rates are higher with people who don't have frontline experience. So if they're, and we're not exactly sure where and why that, like what the what behind that, but those who have less exposure to um, combat tend to be more likely to have that than those who don't.
What about civilian in PTSD?
Trauma. Trauma is your most common trigger for a PTSD diagnosis.
So if you guys hear whining, those are our dogs in the background.
They are not being abused or neglected, unless you can consider a lack of attention, immediate attention, neglect. Clove is currently doing what we refer to as tinkerbelling, i.e., in the old the old play, the clap bit, so Tinkerbell doesn't die. That's Clove.
So when how do you tell when someone has PTSD versus generalized anxiety?
Panic is typically, so there's a typically happens so much after the event. It's within an amount of time after the event. So, like, for example, take it off. Um, Victims of trauma often will start having panic symptoms relatively close to the event. But they aren't always what you would exactly consider um, true panic, like standard panic attacks. So, like, for example, I have kind of, like, when we talked last week, I have several different types of panic attacks. But it's more than just that. It's also loss of focus. It's um, a level of inattention to things, struggling to stay on task that is not something else. So it's not ADHD. It's not just I'm doing a standardized test and I'm bored or I've zoned out. It's a form of compartmentalization.
The thing, like the layperson, as a layperson, tend to think PTSD is someone's gone through some stuff, and then 6 months later, you drop a plate and they've had a panic attack.
Like with the thunder last night.
Yeah.
It's a accelerated or acerbated to the extreme startle response. So we're talking, like, for example, we're based in West Virginia. So we had storms last night. We had pretty severe thunderstorms, and when they were right overhead, one of the thunder booms went off. And if I had been a turtle, I would have pulled into my shell. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about a level of exaggerated response. Everything is that it's not.
And this is definitely not the kind of thing you can diagnose yourself, right?
No.
We have to go talk
You,
to it.
yeah, you can kind of be like, hey, I have had some traumatic experiences, and might be like, hey, I'm struggling with panic and things like that. And it might be something like that. So it doesn't, when I say trauma, it doesn't have to be I was abused or neglected or something like that. It can be grief. Trauma doesn't have to be physical pain or if I hope that makes sense. It can be like medical trauma, having, experiences where you feel like you're um like where you weren't listened to or to the extreme where you felt um
Or you just had to have a surgery, like, or something like that. Like, even if it was completely,
yes, or you had a near death experience. That's a trauma. And that would be considered a medical trauma. And things like that can absolutely trigger a PTSD experience.
no. So I'm just going to point out we have a rule in our house that we don't play trauma bingo.
Mhm.
No one's trauma is better or worse than anybody else's. You don't win a prize because you got all the right traumas in a row.
Yeah.
And
There is
so,
no gold medal for trauma Olympics.
yeah, what is defined as as trauma, we don't we don't question that, right?
Mhm.
If it sucked, if it hurt, it's a trauma, right? Big, minor. That's because for some people, what could be a major trauma for one person is a minor trauma for someone else,
Mhm.
just because of life experience or
Yeah.
personality or whatever.
Well, and just the support network. If you have the support network to go through something, um, it's people downplay this how important support is. So if you have a healthy and well done support network, well put together support network, there are things that can be an extreme trauma that might not cause PTSD, that for someone who doesn't have that same strong support network could wreck them. And so that's one of the like that's why we talk about we do not play trauma bingo. There are no prizes, no one wins, everybody ends up hurt.
All right, so um, what's the difference between complex PTSD and regular PTSD?
So just to be kind of upfront, diagnostic criteria. So complex PTSD is considered a diagnos is complex PTSD is not diagnostic, or not a diagnostic criteria that you or something that you can diagnose with DSM. So like regular PTSD, you can. Complex PTSD. I want to look this up so I make sure I tell you correctly because I don't want to give out any information that is incorrect. So,
She's going through her notes real quick.
yeah, so complex PTSD can develop after prolonged stress, repeated trauma, and PTSD and complex PTSD share diagnostic criteria and symptomology. Um, it's
She found Squeaky.
um, so it's often things that are so like
Well, from a layperson's perspective, what's the main thing that's different?
um so complex PTSD is um CPTSD is what it's commonly abbreviated to. It's um it's an inability it's more like an inability to regulate emotions. It's there is a really great source that I will try and link on our Facebook page that focuses on complex PTSD, but it's like more like distrust. I want to say it's a lower form of PTSD. It's just
Less intense or more drawn out?
I would say it's more prolonged. It's typically a more prolonged experience as opposed to because PTSD can be triggered by a single experience, where complex PTSD is typically a prolonged series of experiences. So,
So if you grew up in a household that was constantly a problem, you're more likely to have complex PTSD rather than if you were in a regular normal household and like had one bad incident.
right, yeah. Um, so yeah, but a lot of times we just say PTSD because PTSD is in the DSM-5. Now, complex PTSD is a recognized um it is a recognized disorder, but it is not something that we can give like a classification. So it's not something that, for example, and I hate to phrase it this way, but it's not something that is billable. So you can have a complex PTSD diagnosis, but
But your doc's gonna put down regular PTSD because that's what they can bill for.
right. So they would probably put PTSD with complex features, is probably how they would phrase it. Now you're going to hear a lot of bouncing around because now they're going to wrestle.
Okay. All right, well, so we talked briefly about PTSD and CPTSD. We talked about generalized anxiety and panic last week. What else?
So to kind of bounce off of white coat syndrome, there is medication induced anxiety. And so what that means is that you are on a medication that is inducing anxiety. So like, for example, Synthroid, which is a medication that you take for your for an underactive thyroid. If you are over medicated for that, that could trigger symptoms of anxiety.
Okay. Um, all right. Well, let's see. So we've got like the environmental, and what are like some of the common ways to help people with PTSD and the CPTSD?
I wish you guys could see this.
We gotta fix up a camera for them at some point.
Yes.
All right. What's some of the ways we can help?
Just real quick, there is a couple anxiety disorders that we didn't talk about that I just want to there is social anxiety, which is anxiety that in social situations. You have separation anxiety, which is anxiety that is triggered when being separated from what you would consider a touchstone person. Um, there's of course GAD, which is generalized anxiety disorder, panic, of course, OCD, which is obsessive compulsive disorder, which is
I guess that would be an anxiety disorder, wouldn't it?
um monk is probably what most people are going to think about. But it is Mark Summers did if you're a child of the late 80s, early 90s, or if you watch the TV show Unwrapped on Food Network, you would know Mark Summers. He is very open about his OCD.
John Green's another famous OCD.
Um, uh, Howie Mandel is another one. That's what like it's not just being germaphobe, it's organization, but it is ritualistic.
Well, it's those recurring intrusive thoughts, right?
A great example is if you've ever seen kids doing the little if you step on a crack, you'll break your mother's back. That can manifest to if I step on like it that becomes an anxiety thought for someone with OCD. If I don't do these things, like if I don't check the lock 50 times, the one time I don't check it, it's going to be unlocked and the house is going to get broken into, or the dogs are going to get out of the yard, or it's spiraling is the best way to describe OCD. And then you have the plethora of phobias. So, agoraphobia, claustrophobia, arachnophobia, those are all anxiety disorders. So,
Okay. Well, yeah. How do we help?
A lot of it is just being there. And for individual people, again, like we talked about last week, it's learning what works best. So, for example, with me, depending on the type of panic attack I have, depends on what I need to help with stability. So, if I'm having, for example, one of my dissociative panic attacks, I need some kind of physical interaction to help ground me back into reality. And what I mean by that is when you have one of those panic attacks, and I'm using disassociation kind of loosely because there's not really a better way to describe it. You're fixated, your brain, and it might not even be the conscious part of your brain is fixated on a past experience or a future experience. And so you're just stuck basically in this spiral and your brain can't function past it. So by someone touching you or something like that, it grounds you into reality. It's why having things like worry stones or things that can help self soothe can be really beneficial because they can help with that grounding aspect.
What about like white coat syndrome and that sort of thing? Same idea, just
Yeah, white coat syndrome, it's one of those things.
or any of the phobias, which are
Yeah, it's if you have a phobia, um, it is one of those things that you need to work with, find a therapist or counselor or psychologist who has experience working in phobias. Because this kind of work is not something that everybody is the right fit for. And we're going to talk about what I like. We're going to talk about client rights. But as a client, you have the right to ask for a different therapist if you don't feel that you mesh. So if you are struggling with phobia, one of the things that is commonly done with phobia is exposure therapy. And exposure therapy works by exposing yourself to the trigger. And by exposing the trigger, you're exerting control over the anxiety symptoms. You're basically lessening this idea that the trigger holds power.
this does not mean you can take someone who has arachnophobia and start throwing spiders at them.
No. It would be things like, hey, I'm gonna show you a picture of a spider. We're gonna talk about spiders. We're going to go to the pet store and look at spiders. Those kinds of things. It's going to be much less, and then it eventually would build up to handling spiders. Eventually.
Like
Um,
controlled circumstances under doctor supervision.
yes.
Like you don't like this is not just something that you and your buddy should start doing on your own.
Yeah, exactly. Um,
For those of us who are like assuming like we're just hanging out with somebody and they have a sudden phobia attack, what are our options? Like, we just get them out of the situation?
remove them or the object. So, for example, if it is a spider, snake, something like that that you can remove from the situation, remove the critter. Obviously, I'm not advocating at all that you do anything to the creature. They have honestly, it's probably just the creature was wandering through the area, but for example, if you know someone who has a phobia of dogs and you have dogs, meet with them outside your home. Let the dogs out in the backyard. If it's hot like it is now, put the dogs in a space that is safe for them, that they're not going to get themselves in trouble, but also so the person who is afraid of dogs can be safe and sane as well. So it's a lot of it is keeping in mind that anxiety is not a choice. It's not like I'm going to have a panic attack. It is a uncontrolled reaction to a stimuli.
Yeah, as the guy watching a panic attack, like sometimes it's like you want to in your head, you just want to roll your eyes, like, why are you doing this? And because our brain, I want to assign you to have a choice because that means there's control of the situation. When you don't, like, there's no. choice being made here. It's just happening. So
Yeah.
it's like I think of it as like you can't think of anxiety as dealing with someone who's making choices. You have to think of it as like dealing with a blizzard or a rain that's just not stopping. It's gonna happen. You can't stop it. Like me as the guy, the layperson in the room can't stop it. You just have to mitigate it as best as possible.
And for the person who is experiencing it, we also want to roll our eyes and be like, what the fuck? Why is this happening? What is going on? Because we often also can't control it. We often also feel out of control. We feel um out of control is the best way to describe it. Like our brain or our body is acting without our permission. Um, it's like I had a former client reach out to me. It's like, hey, I just wanted to let you know I was in the hospital today. And I followed up with him, was like, hey, what's going on? And it's like, well, I had a panic attack so bad I thought I was dying. And if you guys remember from last week, we talked about panic. If you've never had a bad panic attack before, that's what it feels like. It feels like a heart attack.
All right, we are about the half hour mark. So, any last thoughts you want to do for today?
Um, I think with anxiety and panic, it's really important to remember that it is not an active choice, the person who's having it. So if you know someone who is having panic attacks, you know someone who is struggling with anxiety, ask them when they are outside of a panic attack. Ask them, what can I do? What do you think would be beneficial? Talk with them about coping skills that can be helpful. I have some bands that were originally designed to help with my carpal tunnel that sometimes I use. There's an aspect of um, just kind of the stimulation to them that can help. There's enough pressure to them that it can help with grounding because
Um,
it's an unusual
is it also like those little pain stimming fidgets, like those spiky plastic things you can grip?
Yeah, and bear again, remember, take what works for you, leave what doesn't. So if you, I'm not like, if you have a history of self-harm, pain stems are not going to be what I would recommend. And so when I'm talking about that, they are either metal or 3D printed objects that you can hold or rub or squeeze that isn't smooth. It's got a texture to it, and it's not truly painful. It's just uncomfortable enough that it can help with grounding. Because remember, the idea is your brain is going elsewhere. You're the lizard that drives the when we all slept around fires and the dark was scary. When dogs were wolves and the world was wild. That's a good sentence.
Yeah, I like it.
But anyway, so that is one of the lizard part of the brain is kind of what's taken over with anxiety. And so you want to be able to kind of bring that back, and stimulation like a pain stem or anything like that is can help with that. Holding an ice cube, again, some of those things that we talked about can help with that. um, you know, um, Dogs, that kind of affection can be super helpful. Um, Both of our pups have gotten me out of panic attacks before when I've been home alone. So do not ever underestimate, and it doesn't have to be dogs. It can be any of your companion animals. So, but your splash screen is brought to you today by Cyberpunk 77 by CD Projekt Red.
Mhm.
Since it's not World of Warcraft this time, I thought I'd mention it.
And next week, we do we know what we're doing next week?
We hadn't picked a topic yet.
We haven't picked a topic yet. We'll figure it out. We also will probably have seen Superman by then, so we might talk about that briefly as well.
Yep.
Um, but otherwise, any last words, last thoughts?
No, I'm probably leaning towards maybe doing we could do something with hypervigilance, kind of building on the PTSD and anxiety that we've been talking about. We could do an episode on coping skills, kind of building again on anxiety. So just a couple of options. So if anybody has any suggestions, feel free again to shoot an email out. I will probably post something on our Facebook page again, which is the same name as the podcast. It's Cloudy with a Chance of Therapy. So feel free to follow us there.
And our email, cloudywithachancethereapy.gmail.com or at gmail.com. Um, and otherwise, we will see you next week.
I hope everybody has a great week. And again, sorry for the podcast being a couple of days late. We will be back to our regular record on Wednesday, post Thursday. So if you have any suggestions for next week's content, please get us to the email or on the Facebook page by Wednesday.
All right. Love y'all. Bye.
Bye.